Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Friends Life Care Wellness webinar, Age to Perfection, Nutritional and Integrative Approaches to Feeling Your Best, presented by Dr. Joel Edmond. My name is Gail Tamarchio, and I'm the Friends Life Care Director of Wellness Initiatives, and I'm delighted that you're joining us today. I'm the moderator for today's session and would like to start by providing some housekeeping information to ensure that you know how to fully participate in today's webinar. Here's a screenshot that shows an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this in your upper right-hand corner. Okay, you're listening in using your computer or tablet speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. If you're having a problem hearing the presentation, please check the volume settings on your computer. Now, you will have the opportunity to submit questions and comments at any time during the presentation by typing them into the questions pane of the attendee interface. Even if he doesn't answer your question at the time it is asked, Dr. Joel will respond to all questions before the end of the webinar. You should have received an email from me 30 minutes ago with a copy of Dr. Joel's presentation and his handouts. That way you can follow along throughout the presentation and take notes if you'd like. If for some reason you didn't receive the handouts, please check your junk mail folder. If you still don't have them, please send me a message through the question box and I'll resend them to you. And the question box is, as you see to the right of that arrow. Just type a question in there and hit enter and we'll get it. Okay, so you will also receive a recording of the webinar later today if you'd like to receive what is covered, you'd like to review what is covered or share it with a friend. Now, I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Joel Edmond. Dr. Joel is a clinical nutritionist, health coach, educator, and wellness program consultant with 30 years of clinical, teaching, and research experience. He specializes in counseling and coaching clients and patients about the most effective use of nutritional and integrative health therapies for everything from chronic and complex symptoms and disorders to wellness and disease prevention. Dr. Joel holds a master's degree in clinical nutrition from Drexel University and a doctorate in nutritional science from Boston University. He was the director of integrative nutrition and the associate research director at Jefferson Integrative Medicine in Philadelphia for over 11 years. And he also is the author or co-author of 20 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. Dr. Joel, we're so grateful to have you here today, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gail, and it's a pleasure to be here. Do we have the transfer, Gail, yet to my slides? There we go. Okay.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. So I hope everyone can see my first slide, and welcome everyone. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here today and to be able to talk about my passions related to healthcare and health promotion. And so I think you'll find the information interesting and helpful, but it's certainly my goal to help you understand a little bit better about some of the symptoms and issues that you can come across and how you can take some specific steps to feel better and in many cases feel great. So as Gail mentioned, you should have a copy of the slides and a couple of handouts. Just by way of a little bit more introduction. So I do have a master's and doctorate in nutrition. My doctoral research was on depression and memory in an older population. So I've always had an interest in aging and the impact that it has on the nervous system and emotions and psychology. And then I worked at the Atkins Center for Complementary Medicine before in New York before coming back to Philadelphia. And so I very well versed in higher protein, lower carbohydrate approaches to diet. But I was also vegetarian at one point. So, you know, I think that illustrates that it's just so important to make sure that these nutrition and lifestyle approaches are individualized for you so that they really produce the best results and are really effective for each one of us as an individual. So this, let's see here. Okay. This next slide just illustrates we really want to be engaged and enjoy relationships as we get older. This couple chose to do some biking, but again, it's up to each of us to decide, what are the things that are most important and to engage in order to feel our best, both physically and emotionally and spiritually. So specifically what we're going to do over the next 40 minutes or so is to just go over some specific disease issues related to aging, like heart disease and fatigue and memory, depression, osteoporosis, and cancer, but specifically look at it from a perspective of nutrition and lifestyle, because these are all things that we can each own to a certain degree, partner with our healthcare practitioners, and again, as I mentioned, to have some practical approaches and next steps that you can try out so that you can make sure that you're seeing the results that you want to see. This actually was the mission when I was at Jefferson Integrative Medicine. So I just want to go through this just very briefly. We recognize that illness and healing involve all aspects of ourselves: biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. We seek to create therapeutic partnerships that are compassionate and attuned to the unique needs of every client or patient. We know that each person can be empowered to bring greater wellness into his or her life. So I think we would all probably appreciate that, the more time we take to eat better, to exercise, to practice relaxation techniques, to be involved with family and friends and others, it all can have an individual effect. And when we put it all together, we then have a fairly powerful program that can really see good effects. And I've certainly seen that when I've been working one-on-one with people for nutrition, health coaching, and holistic approaches to wellness. Another way to look at this, this was from an art, I guess it was actually a book chapter, looking at some the different approaches that can be taken. So the first one was dietary, nutritional supplement, herbal, and other biological therapies. The second category was manual healing methods, from osteopathic manipulation, chiropractic, massage, pressure point therapies. The third is mind-body interventions. And we'll go into each of these in a little more detail and show how you can individualize these for your specific circumstances. So mind-body interventions would be biofeedback, meditation, yoga, mindfulness-based stress reduction, hypnosis, art and music therapy. And then the last category are kind of self-contained other medical systems like traditional Oriental medicine or acupuncture, Ayurveda, homeopathy. So again, these are just overviews of ways to look at a variety of different approaches that, when you put them all together, have a really potentially effective outcome and effect that you're looking for. So one of the first effects is, what is aging and when does it begin? And some people describe it as processes that contribute to the development of heart disease, memory problems, mood problems, osteopenia or osteoporosis. So in many ways, it's looking at decline in function, so weaker metabolism or inflammation or plaque formation. And while people say that it starts in our 30s, it really starts when we start to see changes occurring. You'll recognize, I'm sure, that with the epidemic of obesity and diabetes, that's happening earlier and earlier. So it's when these processes really start to begin. And it also can be shown by when we have a harder time bouncing back or from injuries or stresses, so that our physical and emotional resilience is less. Another way to see this is This is from a textbook of mine that was called Modern Nutrition and Health and Disease, looking at blood sugar fluctuations, changes in nerve cell conduction, and measures of heart function and kidney function and lung function. So, this is not automatic. It really, it's based on certain diseases or symptoms that can occur. And as we get older and maybe are not as physically fit, or our nutritional status is not quite as good, it can, just kind of get a foothold and have an impact. So none of this is set in stone, and the things that we're talking about certainly can mediate these changes that occur. This is just a company called Life Extension, and it's really to make the point that you really can't make up for a poor diet by taking a supplement. It certainly would be nice if we could just package this into a pill to take, but unfortunately it's not that easy, and it's a shortcut that tends not to work. So these things that we're now going to jump into is kind of getting at the foundation and the process that we're trying to respond to. So I don't know how many of you have heard of hypoglycemia or insulin resistance, but this does have an effect on metabolism and what's called metabolic syndrome, which is several risk factors that take hold, but it's based on genetics and environmental influences like diet and exercise and stress. This slide suggests that it's related to hyperinsulinemia, or higher levels of insulin in the blood. But it's also, if you have a certain amount of carbohydrate in your diet, you might actually, your pancreas might put out too much insulin, and the insulin is just not working as effectively. So it actually contributes to weaker blood sugar regulation, but also changes in the cholesterol profile, higher triglycerides, lower HDL. But higher insulin and insulin resistance also contributes to higher blood pressure, and all of those things contribute to heart disease and these heart disease risk factors. So metabolic syndrome is actually 3 or more of these risk factors, which are common, but it increases your risk for heart attack or stroke more than just the added effect. It has almost like an exponential effect on your like a 3 to 6 greater risk for heart attack or stroke. So just to break this down again, insulin resistance is actually impaired regulation of blood sugar and higher levels of insulin and less effective insulin. But, many of us have a greater risk for weight gain around the waist, particularly women after they go through menopause, and men as we get older, but also if, again, our diet and exercise and stress management is not quite as good. And it can actually show up when we don't even know it. So it may be present in as many as 25% of healthy people that are non-diabetic, and up to 50% of people with high blood pressure. So this is like an intermediate step before overt diabetes or high blood pressure. And so, again, it reinforces the importance of a healthier diet, regular exercise, and regular stress management techniques. So this was a little bit older, but a really good study that followed people, 6,000 people over 65 who didn't have any chronic diseases, and they followed them for 7 years, and then identified the behaviors that were associated with continued health were significant engagement in physical activity, not smoking, wine intake in women, which is a little controversial. We can talk about that a little bit more, higher education and lower waist circumference. So these were the behaviors that they monitored. And then they found that it actually had a significant impact on heart or cardiovascular risk factors associated with continued health. So higher HDL, which is the good type of cholesterol, lack of diabetes, lower blood pressure, and lower C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation. And being overweight and insulin resistance does contribute to inflammation, because we now know that heart disease is an inflammatory process. So again, just a really good study showing people that didn't have these risk factors when they were followed. These specific activities help to prevent some progression towards higher blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol, and inflammation. So just a really good study showing the relationships that were involved. But to start to get into some specific steps that you can take and issues that could be helpful for you, there's some good research to show that smaller, more frequent meals and snacks do help to control blood sugar better, also can help to prevent going too long without eating, and some symptoms like irritability before meals or excessive hunger, because then you might overeat at the meals, and particularly at dinner time in the evening, overeating before you go to bed can, weaken your metabolism in a way that, some of the food and calories get converted to fat and then get stored. But also another step, the second one, is limiting or avoiding excessive amounts of junk food, processed foods, and high sugar containing foods. So, we're going to talk about balancing meals, and sometimes excessive carbohydrates, particularly refined carbohydrates and sugar containing foods, do contribute to a lot of these symptoms and disorders like heart disease. So the third point is to try and have more complex carbohydrates from whole vegetables and fruits and whole grains. And exercise also helps to balance that out. So you don't have to have a great diet and exercise program. Not like you're going out for the Olympics next year, but finding that right balance. And what I also find is you don't have to have a perfect diet, but changes in diet, maybe improvements in exercise, developing a good stress management technique. It's getting at that overall approach. And in the next slide, we're going to talk about how to balance meals for protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And again, the exercise just helps to with so many different things but particularly it helps to balance food for weight and fitness. So here talks about, particularly at lunches and dinners, how to balance your meals. Healthy proteins can be from beans or bean products if you like those things, or if you tend to be vegetarian, but certainly fish and poultry. And red meat is okay, but less often. There is also more availability of grass-fed beef, which is healthy. It has healthier fats and fatty acids in there, like omega-3 fatty acids. So that would be maybe a third of your meal coming from protein, a third of the meal or more from salad, and cooked low carbohydrate vegetables like the greens, cooked greens and salads, and zucchini, broccoli, onions, scallions, those kinds of things. And then healthy complex carbohydrates from starchy vegetables like cooked carrots or sweet potatoes, and whole grains like rice or quinoa or other whole grains. Then it's really healthy snacks are really helpful and important. And so just to be focused on some of the healthy snacks. It can be from vegetable sticks like carrot, cucumber, or celery sticks with a dip or a spread like hummus or guacamole, or nut and seed spreads. So you could put some almond butter on celery, or on an apple. Fruit is also a healthy snack. An ounce of nuts and seeds is a healthy snack. Could be like eight nuts or seeds. Well, actually, seeds you can have more. Some avocado is really healthy. Could take a rice cake and put a nut butter or hummus on that. Popcorn is okay. Some cheese would be okay. So these would be some examples, and I've gone through a lot of things. So why don't we take a break now, and if there are some specific questions that you have about some of the things that we talked about, why don't we address 2 or 3 of those now?
Okay, Joel, I do have a question for you about, you had said like 4 to 6 small meals a day. And recently there's been a lot out about intermittent fasting,
Right.
where you wait 14 hours. And so how do you feel about intermittent fasting?
So that's a great question. I think that intermittent fasting is a tool that can be used. And so, you could have a late breakfast like 9 o'clock, and then lunch at noon, and then a mid-afternoon snack, maybe a light dinner at 5 or 6, and then, I think they say to stop eating after 7. So I think it's a matter of trying to, fine tune an overall program. So what I would do is encourage people to maybe not do intermittent fasting first, but maybe develop a good diet and exercise and relaxation program. And that would then give you a sense of what your foundation level of energy and symptoms are in general. And then if you wanted to try intermittent fasting for like a week or 2 and see how you do. But I think it's a good question that, would be helpful to try at some point. But I always encourage people to establish a foundation healthy nutrition and lifestyle program first, and then try some different things. I mean, beyond intermittent fasting, you could also do like a juice fast for a day, where you just do vegetable and fruit juice for 4 or 5 times during the day. So there are just a lot of different tools, and intermittent fasting is one of those tools to try.
And then how many hours should you wait if you do try intermittent fasting? Is it 12 hours or 14 hours?
Well, it's a great question, and there are probably 10 to 15 different intermittent fasting programs. So, so one is, I think, 14 hours, where, you 9, let's see. So let's say you ate breakfast, let's say at 10 o'clock, and then you ended at 7 o'clock eating. What is that? That's 14 hours. So that would be, from 10 to 7 during the day is when you can eat, and then you don't eat anything from 7 o'clock until 10 o'clock the next morning.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. And I do have one other question about, with all the information, as you said, there's so much out there, like, you could have all these different programs for intermittent fasting. We've also heard a lot about the microbiome, and about how much, about how important it is to keep the microbiome healthy. But how do you know where to go for reliable information? It seems like you can find lots of information, but how do you know what is reliable?
Well, and so similar to the intermittent fasting, to work with a nutritionist or a health coach, or if your primary care doctor knows about this stuff. So it's, the first thing is to work with people that really have a lot of experience. So, questions to ask them would be, so how long have you worked with this stuff, and what kinds of results have you seen? But, the microbiome, there's great research being done. We'll know a lot more in about 5 to 10 years, but I use it particularly with people with stomach and intestinal symptoms, or problems like reflux, or irritable bowel, or inflammatory bowel. But again, just to take a probiotic is not the answer. You have to have a pretty good healthy diet, regular exercise. I mean, I have a sensitive stomach myself, and I know when I feel so much better when I exercise, and I know that stress makes my symptoms worse. So certainly looking at microbiome and a probiotic for GI problems, but there's some information that it's also helpful for mood issues, for anxiety and depression. So there's a relationship there, and it's also if there's an imbalance, we're more susceptible to autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. And so, again, I think it's working with people that are aware of the importance of the microbiome and can either recommend a supplement or some testing to evaluate that. Most conventional medical testing labs don't measure for enough healthy bacteria and potentially harmful bacteria, but there are a few holistic or integrative medicine testing companies that could evaluate that.
Oh, thank you very much. Very interesting.
So let's go on to the next step, which would be looking at a little more information. I think the Mediterranean diet is the best diet to start with. So it's really just a natural, healthy diet, which has a lot of whole foods, not a lot of processed foods, and balances plant-based foods with, other, with identified quantities of protein and red meat, but also includes things like olive oil, avocado, and nuts and seeds and those kinds of things. So just briefly, there is research to show the Mediterranean diet has beneficial effects on memory and cognition. The first study showed a Mediterranean diet with olive oil or nuts was associated with improved cognitive function. Second one, adherence to Mediterranean diet associated with positive or better cognitive performance. There are a few studies that did not show a relationship, but more and more places, mainline health system in this area has a brain preventive brain function clinic. I think it's Beth Israel in New York. And a lot of this is for prevention of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. I've also been associated with some work by a neurologist out at UCLA who wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's Disease. And he just published an article about 100 cases where he and a variety of integrative medicine or functional medicine practitioners have shown some slowing of cognitive decline or reversal, some degree of reversal. So it's really an exciting and interesting area, but again, it's very comprehensive, very strict diet, a lot of supplements, exercise, stress management, and a range of other testing and approaches. So it's really an exciting time for this area that's being examined. Also, some information on the Mediterranean diet and depression. The first study looked at type 2 diabetics and depression, showing that a Mediterranean diet was beneficial to decrease the risk of depression. Second one was in a general population, suggesting that a higher quality diet was associated with a lower risk of onset of depressive symptoms. And again, it's just high in vegetables, whole grains, fruit, healthy proteins from beans and bean products and fish and poultry. Again, Mediterranean diet and risk for cancer, showing that adherence to a Mediterranean diet was associated with lower risk of cancer of the colon and rectum, breast, gastric cancer, head and neck cancer, and prostate cancer. Also a lower risk of cancer mortality. So once people develop, cancer, healthy diet along with other holistic approaches that we've talked about can certainly improve quality of life. And because there are so many factors involved, some of the research is harder to show benefits in cancer survivors. But I've worked with a lot of cancer survivors where it really had a significant impact, certainly on quality of life, and I believe survival also. But some of the research there is mixed. Okay, and then just to review the overall approach, so diet and targeted nutritional supplements, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then significant movement, exercise, stretching, yoga, tai chi, weight training. So again, a lot of, but it should be stuff that you enjoy. This shouldn't be torture. And then finding, certainly in terms of stress management, exercise is a good stress management technique, but other types of approaches like breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then other individualized approaches, whether it's massage or chiropractic. Again, you do need to make sure that you have a good, that's why I err on the side of working with an osteopathic medical doctor that does osteopathic manipulation. Counseling is very helpful. Acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, and other approaches like that, so that you really have an overall approach that's specific for you. Again, stress is a big factor for memory and Alzheimer's disease. So this was an recent article that talked about that. But the research is well known that very high and chronic stress does kill cells in the hippocampal area, which is primarily responsible for memory. So I think that's pretty well known and established. Then just briefly around osteoporosis, these are some of the risk factors for osteopenia, which is a step before osteoporosis. So depending upon these risk factors, it just can be really important to talk to your primary care doctor, and you may have a specialist, but getting DEXA scans periodically as required. But the dietary approach is enough calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, although vitamin D is mostly gotten through higher levels of supplementation. And there are some other supplements that are being found to be helpful. Exercise is certainly important, the weight-bearing exercise, which I'm sure you've heard about. And then other lifestyle issues like too much caffeinated coffee, smoking, alcohol tends to deplete the body of calcium and contributes to those things. So briefly, in terms of the prudent or effective use of supplements, the healthy diet needs to be the foundation, and you want to look at each of the supplements for its evidence-based, how much evidence of benefit is there. But it's also working with people that have, used it a lot in clinical practice. A lot of medical doctors that have no understanding about it say there's no evidence, but there is evidence when you look at in vitro or test tube research, animal research, and clinical research. The problem is there's not as much clinical research as there is pharmaceutical research because there's not as much money, and it's not as much part of the research system that's funded by the National Institutes of Health. You also want to look at a defined dose and time frame. Sometimes you'll see some benefits within a week or two. Sometimes it takes a month for some of the supplements. And then, supplements are also particularly helpful if somebody's had an adverse reaction to a medication, so they want to try natural approaches, or the medication is helpful, but not as helpful as you'd like it to be, or you just want to try the natural approach first to see what's helpful. But again, you really need people that are experts in using this so you can get a good quality supplement and make sure that it's having the effect that that you want to. You also, in clinical practice, I also see people who are taking so many supplements, they don't even know if it's helping or not. So you really want to know whether it's helpful or not. And again, be working with somebody that's very knowledgeable. I usually start out with a multivitamin and mineral, and then omega-3 fatty acids are important and helpful for anti-inflammatory effects, for cardiovascular function, for nervous system function. And then magnesium, calcium, and vitamin D are important for bone density and strength. But magnesium is also important for a lot of other things. It's important to know that if you have weaker kidney function, then you probably should not be taking magnesium because it accumulates in your system. It could be harmful, but it is a very important and helpful supplement that a lot of people either have deficiency or subclinical deficiency or insufficiency is what's being called now. So again, these would be helpful to talk with about with your primary care doctor or nutritionist or other practitioners. You should also get a vitamin D level checked because most people are deficient in vitamin D. There's some controversy about what the optimal level of vitamin D is. Over 30 milligrams per deciliter is, quote, normal. I shoot for above 40. Some people say above 50. So we're still trying to identify what the optimal level is. And then for other supplements, they should be targeted and individualized. For GI problems, it could be a probiotic or a digestive enzyme or aloe. For sleep, it could be melatonin or magnesium. And then there are a variety of other supplements that could be recommended for memory and depression, anxiety, fatigue, heart functioning. So again, it's if there's some questions, I can address that, but it's a little bit too broad to touch on at the moment. So before I go into stretching and exercise and relaxation, any other questions at this point, either about diet or supplements or some of the things that we've talked about?
Joel, the information on supplements is very interesting. Just had a question for you, though. Before anyone starts to supplement, they should speak with their doctor first to see if it interacts with anything else that they're taking. Is that true? Or
yeah, I mean, so certainly with your primary care doctor, but your primary care doctor may not know of the benefits. So if you see a nutritionist or a naturopath or somebody else that's very knowledgeable, they can sometimes know that, but you certainly should be talking with your primary care doctor about all the supplements anyway.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds good. Thank you so much for the information.
Okay. And so I think, are people emailing questions in or not at the moment?
I think not at the moment. You're doing such a good job of explaining it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm keeping you pretty busy with the stuff we're going over. So, okay. So just briefly, a reminder of, as we get older, we often have aches and pains. So, it could be seeing a physical therapist, or, if you are in good shape, if you're seeing a personal trainer, make sure it's somebody that's experienced and is very comfortable with working with people with maybe diabetes or fibromyalgia or something. So again, you do need to select the people you work with very carefully to make sure you get the individualized and effective approaches that you need. Again, a variety of different approaches are helpful. Water exercises are excellent. Many places now have yoga and Tai Chi that are designed for those of us as we get older. But even there's some research on Tai Chi now on memory and energy and flexibility. So again, having a group of people that are familiar with this to work with can help you, take some steps to move forward with it. There are also a variety of stress management techniques. This was a study that was done by a friend of mine, Diane Reibel, who's actually head of the Mindfulness Institute at Jefferson. This was in a general population, and they have a mindfulness-based stress reduction group, or MBSR group, like 4 or 5 groups 4 times a year, winter, spring, summer, and fall. And it's a great program, so this was a study that was published that showed significant benefits to pain, vitality. So the blue was a 10 to 15% improvement in pain. The red was 25% improvement in vitality, 40% improvement in anxiety, and a 35% improvement in mood and depression. So again, and this is probably the best research relaxation technique that's out there. Penn does also have a program, but the one I know most effectively is Jefferson. And this is another study by a friend of mine and colleague who actually showed that this progressive muscle relaxation technique showed that it had significant effects on genetic activity. So not only does it make you feel better, but it affects your metabolism, physiology, all the way down to the genetic level. So in the article, they talked about the first compelling evidence that progressive muscle relaxation response produces genetic expression changes in short and long-term practitioners, increase the capacity to respond to oxidative stress or damage to cells and tissues. And again, whether it's this technique or MBSR, yoga, a variety of other approaches, the relaxation techniques are helpful. So I'm just going to go through these quickly. This is some experiences that I've had with people that I've worked with in my practice. So first one was a 70-year-old woman with high blood pressure, osteoporosis, weight problems, constipation, and fatigue. By incorporating diet, targeted supplements, a little bit of exercise, and relaxation, she saw some significant weight loss. Her energy was better. Second one was an 85-year-old man with arthritis, some neuropathy, so some nerve pain, poor balance, diabetes, fatigue, saw improvements in blood sugar, and some of the neuropathy was better. The last one was an 85-year-old woman with high blood pressure, anemia, heartburn, diverticulosis, fatigue, low back pain, and a history of cancer, specifically lymphoma. For her, the GI symptoms improved, the energy was better, and massage helped her low back pain. So again, this is just to illustrate some of the steps that people can take and some of the improvements that they can see. Again, and it's not that they're doing an extreme change. It's really just to try and focus in on some of these specific areas and do a little bit better. So it's almost like fine tuning instead of major changes. So just to review very quickly, starting with a Mediterranean diet, but also some other adjustments in terms of sugars and refined flour products, and then some people like to do better with a little bit higher protein, a little bit lower carbohydrate, a little bit higher healthy fat. So that can certainly help with blood sugar regulation and other symptoms. And then some shakes and smoothies with higher phytonutrients. I have a simple one which includes a whey protein powder with frozen kale and ground flax seeds, and put some turmeric in there. So these are all health promoting, and mindful eating is a very good technique to try and make sure that you're choosing healthy foods, but also not eating because you're stressed, but eating because you're hungry, and then trying to make some healthy choices with that. So then finally, so this is the overall therapeutic approach, which I've mentioned: healthy diet, targeted supplements, effective stretching, movement, exercise. And in addition to the stress management, it's also a reminder that social network, having good engagement with friends and family really has been shown to extend length of life by 7 years. So again, a variety of different techniques that when you put them all together are really, really helpful. I don't really have time to talk about positive psychology, but a lot of good research actually done at University of Pennsylvania. They have a positive psychology program. And the theory behind this is it's not good enough to just avoid some of the negative symptoms. Finding ways to flourish and thrive is a really good goal to have. So I think I'm going to stop here just to say, the more you engage in this to try and make some adjustments, the more that I think, particularly if you're working with really good people, that there really is a great amount of improvement that you can see to help with a variety of different problems that occur as we get older. So why don't we just stop here? I think we have about 11 minutes for questions and answers, and I'm happy to stay over a little bit if we have more time that we need to go over some of your questions. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. And Gail, any questions?
We do have some questions. Thank you very much for that really interesting presentation. But follow-up questions are, do you have a good substitute that you would recommend for chocolate as a crunchy snack or spread?
So I believe the very dark chocolate is a good snack. Now, I say that with a caution because some people, when they have a little bit, they want more and more. So, there are different ways to try, from a practical standpoint, to try and address this. So, one way would be maybe just Monday through Thursday, which is quote like your work week, to try not to have any high sugar containing foods, and the weekends are more relaxing and enjoyable. So during the week to try and make fruit the primary dessert. And if you're healthy and feeling well, and you don't find that a little bit of dark chocolate doesn't upset your stomach or cause any other problems, that might be a good choice for during the week as well. Again, if you tolerate it well, something like a small piece of cheesecake, which has a little protein, not a lot of sugar, hopefully added. So again, it's a very individualized approach to try and identify what works best for each person. But, those would be some ideas that could be helpful.
And Joe, what percent of cocoa do you recommend for the chocolate?
That's a good question. I have meant to go back and get a specific amount. So I think we're talking 70 to 80%, but I haven't gone back specifically to get a specific level.
Okay, thank you. I've read 72%. I always
Okay.
go for that minimum. It's a little not very sweet if it gets much higher. Okay. And if you were to recommend like one small lifestyle change, what would it be? Like if you were starting from scratch, what would be the one small lifestyle change that you?
So I would like to change that question to be two. I think it would be something around stretching, movement, and exercise. So maybe seeing a physical therapist to get a specific stretching program. But the physical therapist could also give somebody a lightweight program also with just like 1 or 2 pound weights. So that would be, one thing. So you could start there. And then I think everybody it's really helpful to find a relaxation technique. So whether it's um, like a chair yoga or breathing exercises or a guided visualization. So, and what I guess my bias is that way because I tend to work with people with chronic and complex types of problems. And most of them have stress in general or stress from not feeling well or having to go to the doctor all the time. And so for those people that I've worked with, they've really had to do some kind of stretching, movement, and exercise and some kind of relaxation techniques. So I would encourage to start with something simple in both of those areas. But again, it's very individual. So those would be some ideas to consider.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, what kind of tests would you recommend for somebody that was interested in having their micronutrient levels checked?
So it's a great question. And so the basic one that I recommend is, pretty much a standard medical analysis because that'll tell you about red blood cells and indirectly about some things. But vitamin D would be one. Second one would be vitamin B12, because as we get older, we may not be digesting and absorbing our food as well. And vitamin B12, if it's low or even borderline low, at the lower end of the normal range, can contribute to a range of anxiety, depression, fatigue. So B12 would be the second one. I also recommend something called homocysteine. Homocysteine is elevated when people are not getting enough folic acid. But homocysteine is also elevated with the most common genetic defect or genetic polymorphism. So if you have elevated homocysteine, you may not be making some of the neurotransmitters that are important and healthy. And so homocysteine is actually a measure of depression if it's elevated or not enough methylation. And then there are some integrative medicine testing companies like Genova that can test for a lot of different things, but sometimes they're not, most times they're not covered by insurance. So it really depends on what the symptoms are, how much and how aggressively you want to go to look at all the nutrients. So it could be a few simple things with your primary care doctor, or it could be if you're working with a holistic or integrative medicine practitioner. So I'm not a medical doctor, but I have an account with this company called Genova, and I can order a range of different, more assertive types of tests that are available, but some cost more than others. And so those would just be some options around testing.
Oh, thank you very much. Sounds like there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
And I have one final question for you at this point. So what credentials should one look for when looking for a nutritionist?
So it's a great question. So most of the nutritionists in the healthcare system are dietitians, and it certainly is a good credential. But some are like, they don't even teach nutritional supplements, at least a more assertive use of nutritional supplements. I have been trying to get in to teach that for a long time, but hasn't worked out. So it's either a dietitian that has experience with supplements and things like an elimination diet, which is a more, and willing and openness and experience with intermittent fasting or some of these other potentially progressive approaches to diet. So I have a master's and doctorate. I'm certified by the American College of Nutrition. So it's a good question. What are your credentials? Who are you certified through? What is your degree? And how much experience do you have working with these things? And Hopefully, by having a conversation with the practitioner, you can feel comfortable and confident that they can help you. But you do need to ask those questions to try and get to the right person.
Thank you very much. And thank you for a wonderful webinar. You gave us a lot of great information, and it's also very empowering to see the choices that we can make to help keep ourselves healthy as much as possible. Of course, some things are out of our control, but it's nice that we have so many choices that we can make. But thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. You will receive a follow-up link in just a few minutes when you leave the webinar with 4 questions. And we would really appreciate it if you would take just a few minutes to provide your feedback. So, we're interested in what you liked about the webinar and if you have any ideas for future webinars. And also, you will receive a follow-up email later today with a link to the recording of today's webinar. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Take care. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joel, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.